Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to take a look at Hexwraith Flame, the new contrast, reformulated contrast. And of course, Hexwraith Flame is now a contrast paint, and this is going to be applied on top of Leadbelcher spray from Games Workshop. You can see here we have our brand new contrast Hexwraith Flame, and we're going to see how it looks on top of metallic base. I'm going to use a medium shade brush from Citadel or any similar sized brush. It's usually probably like around a number 2, number 3 size of brush. Take a very generous amount into the brush and we begin applying it. Now here you can see I'm applying it in a somewhat deliberate, even coverage. It's actually the way we would more or less apply it if we were using it more like a normal kind of opaque paint as opposed to a contrast paint. Contrast paint, typically you want to apply it fairly generously. Here I'm basically applying it in a somewhat controlled fashion, not allowing too heavy a pooling to apply onto any areas, and I'm kind of being, careful as to where I apply the color, so I'm not, just kind of slapping it everywhere, so to speak. I mean, trying to avoid the bolt gun and the chest eagles and the little things and doodads hanging off the belt and everything like that. But otherwise, normally with Hexwraith Flame, now I did not have another Hexwraith Flame available, the previous edition of the color, to do a side-by-side comparison, but from what I recall from the color, this is a lot thinner feeling than the original Hexwraith Flame. The original Hexwraith Flame felt a little bit more opaque, whereas this it does have an opacity, but you can see how a lot of the metallic is shining through the layer of color that we've applied here. So again, I'm just applying this in a fairly moderate fashion, and then of course once we apply, I'm just going to apply it just to the top half of the model here. Anywhere where it's a little too heavy, I'm just going to clean my brush off and then just draw the excess out. I just want to see how it looks straight out of the pot and applied directly in a more kind of traditional fashion of applying the color. And you can see already as it starts to dry that it leaves a lot of the silver or the metals showing through. And here it is once it's completely dry, and you can see how it does knock out a lot of the metallic shine as well as not completely covering it. I'm going to use contrast medium here. I have mine in a dropper bottle just for ease and lack of contamination risk there. I'm going to take a fairly generous amount into the bristles, mix it into 2 drops of contrast medium. So this is kind of like a 1-to-1 mix ratio. And then we're going to apply this on the lower half of the model, applying it in fairly generous fashion, kind of like how we do normally with contrast and shade washes and everything of that nature. And you can see how it does pool up into any of the little recesses and such. And as we move our way around the model, again, I don't want it to build up too heavily on flat surfaces, but I do want it to build up in recesses and nooks and crannies and the little details and things of that nature. But you can already see how the paint is just tinting that surface of the metallic. And again, here I'm just kind of going around and just kind of neatening up some places. Again, though, anywhere where it might be building up too heavily, I just quickly clean off the brush and draw the excess out, basically using the bristles of the brush kind of like a syringe to draw the excess out. Set that aside, allow it to dry, and then once it's dry, you can see how we still have a lot of the metallic shine. We have that slight green change on that surface, and we have those green values in the recesses as well. I actually kind of really like how it looks used in this kind of thinned out fashion like this, and for achieving particular looks on a figure, you definitely might want to consider that. So once the top half has dried, of course it's been fully dried by this point, I'm going to very deliberately apply it onto the areas of the model again, and this is just to build up a second layer just to see what kind of coverage we get. Now the reason why I chose Hexwraith Flame for this example is because it has a very opaque look. It's a very light, bright color, and it has this opacity to it, and so I was very curious to see if we could use it kind of like what we do with the other contrast paints that have more of a transparency to them. Again, I'm building up the color deliberately, so wherever I'm finishing off the brush stroke, that is where I'm going to deposit more of the paint, kind of like what we do when we glaze paint on figures and creating highlights and everything like that. Here I'm just kind of doing a similar kind of thing. I'm just using the brush to just deposit paint here and there as I work my way around. Again, this is not a demonstration on how to apply the paint, as more or less just to see how it looks as we go through various iterations of applying the color and the various ways we can go about achieving a metallic green. And overall, I think it is actually pretty darn cool. And one idea I did have when I was initially applying this was applying it very generously, taking a dry sponge, like the little sponges we use for weathering and such, and basically using that and pulling away the excess paint as we go around and leaving that as if it were chipped paint on the surfaces. I thought that would be kind of fun, and I just haven't demonstrated that. But anyway, with the second layer on, we set it aside, allow it to dry, and you can see how it's really knocked out a lot of that metallic shine. It still has that luminous quality as a metallic does, which is kind of interesting. We're going to take the reformulated Biel-Tan Green. This is the brand new one that's been reformulated. And I'm going to apply this in a typical fashion of a shade wash. I'm still using the large or the medium shade brush. You can see I got a very generous amount on the bristles. Again, when applying contrast and shade wash, I find it is always better to grab a fairly healthy amount onto the bristles, apply it, and if you find it at any heavy pooling, just quickly rinse off your brush and draw the excess out. I find that is the best way to go about applying these kinds of paints, where we are using a fairly large amount initially to achieve coverage and value. With this, I'm just simply working it around the miniature, allowing it to pool up into details and recesses like the little grills and the panel lines and stuff like that. And again, this is a fairly typical way in which we go about painting and creating value on the surfaces. And you may notice immediately already how very green the paint already becomes, and how very saturated, and we get this really interesting contrast level on the model surface. And my initial reaction is that with these new colors and this reformulation, with the original contrast, something like, say, Orc War Boss, you could achieve a very similar result with it in one go, whereas this allows you to be a little bit more deliberate and control the changes in which you see on a surface, and create your value that way, as far as going from bright to darker and moving around the figure as such. I'm also applying it on the lower half of the miniature, just so we can see how it looks, with 2 layers and only 1 layer thinned out, of course. Here you can see I'm just drawing off the excess paint off the model. We set it aside, allow it to dry, and as you can see here, again, I really like how it looks on the bottom half of the figure with more metallic showing through, and yet we got nice dark values and recesses. On the upper half, it's very, very striking. That looks like a metallic salamanders or dark angels, or take your pick as far as what kind of metallic green, but it not quite as metallic. The lower half feels a lot more metallic, but that is it. That is a quick little demonstration on Hexwraith Flame on top of Leadbelcher. A huge thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link. And huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.